Riley, you've seen, obviously, and gotten access to this memo. What do we know? What sort of numbers are we talking about in terms of the funding that's being affected?
Yeah, so just yesterday, the Department of Health and Human Services notified the Wuhan Institute of Virology of the suspension of access to federal funding and potential debarment, which means making this decision permanent, cutting them off long-term from U.S. funding. This is a decision that came after a review that began last September, in which the U.S. government determined that the Wuhan, China-based facility wasn't compliant with federal regulations. Over the course of years, so really from 2014 to 2020, the Wuhan Institute of Virology received more than $1.4 million in U.S. funding, distributed via the NIH and U.S. aid through sub-award grants. Many are familiar with EcoHealth Alliance at this point, which itself has drawn scrutiny from lawmakers and even HHS through its own audit to determine that they didn't adequately monitor the grants that were doled out to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. But this is a incredibly surprising penalty and most drastic action that the U.S. has taken so far over its failure to share documentation about biosafety practices at the facility.
Especially given that the U.S. hasn't necessarily found any conclusive evidence that this was transmitted or there was a lab accident of any sort. So what are the implications then of such a decision and such a penalty for future cooperation and future funding?
Yeah, that is a fabulous question. And just to note, the U.S. decision by the Department of Health and Human Services to suspend this funding comes independently of separate intelligence community assessments, which the IC remains split on whether or not the pandemic started via a lab accident or through naturally occurring animal-to-human transmission. We have seen no smoking gun yet. But as for what this means for broader global funding and foreign research, this is a legitimate question. The U.S. has long spent money supporting R&D abroad, and this is no doubt going to increase tensions with China at a time where international research at the scientific level has certainly been stunted.